Hello, I'm Aurélie de Smet and I'm working at the Faculty of Architecture of the KU Leuven. And I'm here today to tell you about the Solidarity Mobile Housing Project. So this project is mainly a living lab, which includes many actors from academia, but also civil society, from the business sector and also from the government. And together we are focusing on developing, testing and refining a model and a prototype for increasing socio-spatial resilience through the co-creation of mobile houses with and for houseless people on urban waiting spaces in the Brussels capital region. So the research questions of this participatory action research project are: how can vacant areas be temporarily used as sites for housing? And how can we co-create this type of intermediary housing with and for the houseless from the Brussels capital region? As such, the project has four main goals. Firstly, we aim at developing housing co-creation methods and tools, focusing on empowering the various stakeholders by involving them from the start and throughout the whole process. Secondly, we aim at designing an innovative, mobile and adaptable housing type for the most vulnerable users, in which collectivity and internal solidarity between the residents are central, as well as quality, affordability and flexibility. Thirdly, we also aim at creating and strengthening small-scale solidarity networks by activating these urban waiting spaces to allow the citizens to make the city together. And finally, we aim at putting the involvement of vulnerable people on the agenda, especially within the discussion of temporary use of urban waiting spaces. So I'm also presenting to you my colleague from Samenleving Opbouw, who will also help me to answer some of the questions.
Hello, my name is Geraldine Bruniel. I work for the organization Samenlevingsopbouw Brussel, and I'm the project manager of Solidarity Mobile Housing.
The problem is, container what is very important and essential that every human being should have a place at least to stay or to sleep. When you go all over in Brussels, you see people really sleeping in the corners of the street, and when you see this, it means there's a problem somewhere. And the problem is what is housing. But the housing here, but the rent is the problem. The authorities say they will construire des maisons sociales, but it's not enough.
So what is specific for the Brussels capital region is that although it's not so big, it's still a region with international importance. For example, it's the heart of Europe and it's also a gateway to the UK. So there is both a relatively high pressure on the real estate market, as in many metropolitan cities, which is driving the housing prices up, while at the same time there's also a high concentration of low-income residents. And this is actually currently leading to a serious shortage in affordable housing, both in quantitative but also in qualitative terms. So as a result, today, many Brussels citizens have to live in overly expensive, unadapted, badly located or even really unhealthy housing situations. And when we look at the numbers, this is unfortunately also confirming this. For example, today there are more than 48,000 people on the waiting list for social housing, which means that less than half of the demand is met. And there's also the number of homeless people or people living in a situation of housing exclusion, which has doubled over the last 10 years. So unfortunately, we have to say that the right to decent housing is currently not guaranteed in the Brussels capital region. But when we zoom out a little bit more, I think that the main basic underlying reason for the inequality and exclusion on the housing market is the fact that today housing, which should be a fundamental right for all, is treated, to say it with the words of Turner and Fisher, as a noun instead of as a verb. This means that housing is today treated as a product, a tradable good. And in big metropolitan cities like Singapore, London, New York, it is clear that this commodification of housing is already leading to the financialization of it, which started a process that is ultimately driving the real estate prices up until the point that housing is becoming unaffordable, not only for low-income people, but even for middle-income people. So I think what our project is mainly trying to do is to bring back to the table the notion of housing as a verb by proposing an open, transdisciplinary and transsectoral housing co-creation method, which is based on involving all the actors, including the end users, from the start and throughout the whole co-creation process. And then also afterwards through the modular housing product.
So for me, the main challenges, housing challenges in a city like Brussels are the fact that there are big waiting lists for low-income families, for vulnerable people to have access to social housing. The waiting lists are very long, 10 years sometimes, so it's huge. And this means that people have to resort to private housing markets. They have to pay a lot of money for very low qualitative housing. And housing is a basic human right, so that has not been met by the Belgian government. And so for me, this is a big concern because there's still a lot of buildings, sites vacant, a lot of social housing in way of renovation in really bad shape. And so there, I think, lies a challenge to create more housing and to renovate more social housing. What we are trying to do with Solidaire Mobile Housing is to include people, so not only to create housing for them, but to also do it with them, to make people also visible and make their needs visible. And I think there is still, so that's what we're trying to do, that's what other projects are trying to do, but there is still, I think, a long way to go to really be able to do that on a more structural way, on a more fundamental way. Because as you can see, social housing needs in just bricks is not even being met. So let alone trying to include people in the process.
So actually our project really started directly from a need formulated by Samenlevingsopbouw Brussel, which is an NGO working on community building. And what they noticed was that to build a community and for people to be able to just live their life and get involved in the community, having access to decent housing is really a prerequisite. And that because of the affordable housing shortage in Brussels, a lot of people are really deprived of that. So this is why and how they started to working on this housing issue. And first what they did was to start working on the political level, to advocate for more qualitative affordable housing. But then they noticed that this is a very tiring and slow process, and they decided that they also really wanted to do something, to act. So what they did then was they started to look around in the city and they saw all these vacant spaces and empty buildings, and they saw how people were appropriating these to create all kinds of interesting projects. And maybe they also heard researchers like myself advocating how these spaces had the potential to really answer the needs of the inhabitants, and how these bottom-up projects can also, even if they're only temporary, really affect the making of the city. So they also started to help people to appropriate vacant buildings and transform them into temporary housing projects. But what they noticed then is that time and again this required rather high effort and investment, as every time they had to start over and appropriate and transform yet another building, and that part of the investment was each time lost. So what they were wondering at that point is, can't we co-create something, a type of housing which can be quickly installed and which we can also take along with us to really activate the city's waiting spaces for housing. So this is where we found each other.
So it is true that the Solidaire Mobile Housing Project has many partners, so because it is a very complex, multi-layered project. And as a project manager, it's a constant concern to be sure that every one of the partners is being heard, has enough space to express concerns or to bring expertise to the table. And especially for the future inhabitants, it is important because we also want them to be a partner, an expert in the project. They also have a kind of a special, even more a special place, because actually the houses are being built for them. They are going to live in the houses. So there is a very special interest for them. So it is really important to be aware of that and to be aware of creating that space, maybe slowing down, discussing it, and then moving forward together.
In the context of this question, I think it's important to know that the hypothesis behind the project is that by collectively taking part in every step of the co-creation, co-design, co-construction, and later also the co-management of their own houses, the involved houseless people will be empowered not only to build their own individual housing unit, but also to gradually create a solidary living community in interaction with the surrounding neighborhood. And that through this, they will regain a grip not only on their housing situation, but also on their whole life. So it's clear, I think that based on this, we have from the start always tried to put and keep the end users at the heart of the project. They're really considered an integral part of our living lab, and in this collective learning environment that we're creating, they are the experts by experience. So how we are doing this? I think first of all, by providing social guidance. So the project is providing not only individual guidance for each of the inhabitants by CAW, one of the project partners, but also group guidance for all of them as a group by Samenleving Zowel. Then also we're offering skill building. So throughout the project, we're doing this to enable the inhabitants to participate in the whole research and development process, but also more generally to help them grow, develop their skills and talents. So this includes, for example, technical training, but also training on social skills and even things like budget management. Another important part of keeping their needs at the center is to follow their tempo. So we don't take the next step if not everyone is involved or up to speed. So we always try to make sure everyone can follow and understands what we're doing. This doesn't mean we always all have to agree, of course. It's very important that we're allowing this notion of dissensus. So I think we're working in such a way that everyone knows and feels that it's okay to have different opinions and to speak for it. This will always be heard, but we also, of course, have clear protocols for collaboration. At certain points, decisions have to be made, and it's clear that there's a certain way of doing things, and I'm saying this as if it's easy, but it's something that we had to develop gradually, step by step, by communicating a lot with each other, by not only with the inhabitants but also with the other project partners, really try to learn to understand each other and develop a common language. And Kemmis and McTaggart are describing how participatory action research in this context is allowing to open communicative space between all the involved actors. And I think our project can be considered an example of this, because through participating in it, the inhabitants, but also the students, interns, all of us actually are getting a seat at the table in the negotiations, really with professionals, with other experts, with contractors, with artists, with the municipality, and even with the region. So for this to be possible, I think all of us have to transcend the borders of our own disciplines and leave what is familiar to learn to see the world through other people's eyes.
So what we are also trying to do is to create tools, to create ways to communicate, to create a trust and a confidence within everyone to be able to bring expertise to the table, or concerns or needs to the table.
What I've learned is that it's impossible to do this alone. So I'm so glad that we're with a very good and interesting team, and together we're really stronger. We complement each other. So I think finding the right partners and allies is very important. So for this, you have to network and work on building ecosystems of collaboration and knowledge communities where you can share your experience, ideas, and solutions. And this doesn't have to include only professionals. I think including people from the field and also really the end users, which, as I have said before, they are the experts by experience, is really important. To listen to them and really understand their problems, but also the potential solutions they're offering, has really taught me so much already. Then what I also learned is that I think we're working on what Paidakake and Moulart are calling social resilience cells. So we're not going to change and make the society resilient in one big move. You need all these kind of small initiatives which are like little utopias or arenas of resistance which are proving that alternatives are possible. And I hope our project is one of those. And so I'm sure that although we're convinced that our model has many interesting opportunities, it's still clear that it's a prototype which has to be further developed and scaled up. And we need to, we're not claiming that it's going to solve the housing crisis all at once.